Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 11, Episode 125. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Glad you guys are back with us for this Tuesday show. Dave, you guys getting that heat wave out there, or is it just always hot in Vegas, I suppose?
Oh, man, it's always hot in Vegas this time of year, well over 100 degrees. But I looked at or saw a warning light. It looks like we're going to have some rare rain come through here.
Nice.
Possibly today and tomorrow, I think it's calling for. So that would obviously cool things off a little bit. The things that you see going on in like Portland and stuff like that, that obviously rare for them to hit those kind of temperature numbers. And what makes it even worse is they have a little bit of humidity going on up there as well too, because normally that's kind of a wet part of the country up there, on up into Oregon and Washington State and along those lines there. And so I don't envy them to have 110, 112 degree temperature and then have 50% or better humidity on top of it. When it's 115 here, don't get me wrong, 115 is 115. It's oven hot, but you don't have that, you have like 4% humidity. At least you can go outside and sit underneath an awning or something like that, and not be dripping wet. So that was one of the main attractions to us moving here, was the fact that the lower humidity. I mean, I can handle the heat. It's just the humidity that kills you. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now that you've been up to the Depot Weather Channel there.
Hey, we're accurate. We're most trusted Steelers weather-related duo. But yeah, I hope everyone's staying safe up there in the Northwest and Northeast too. I think they're going to get a heat wave as well. But speaking of hot-button issues, Dave, let's continue our discussion on David DeCastro. I don't know if there's been a ton of new information that's come out since Friday's show, but Dr. Mel's done a great job with her terrible take on Sunday, and a post up on Steelers Depot on Monday that really describes the bone spurs injury that he's dealing with. It seems to be recurring, and the crux of the issue of why he needs a third ankle surgery. The surgery, according to Dr. Mel, on average takes about 2 months to recover from. Could be longer for DeCastro, considering just his age and how much of an issue this has been. So kind of gets you a better idea of the seriousness of the injury that DeCastro's dealing with.
Yeah, she did a great job on that, as we've come to expect out of her, and those kind of things. Very detailed. I learned a little bit from that kind of stuff as well, specifically her terrible take and the post on the subject there. Look, we talked, when this thing went down about the importance of the NFI listing and all like that, and whether or not it's going to end up in a grievance or not, and how I said that's one thing that people should not discount here, and really was the thing that kind of surprised me when it came to David DeCastro. And he has since given a couple of interviews. I'm glad to see that happened, because you hate for a guy as kind of revered as he was, I think, and obviously not very vocal on top of it. And look, I don't have a fault with a guy that just lays low like David DeCastro did throughout his career. It's good to hear him do a couple interviews there, but in no uncertain terms, man, it lines up with, I think, what I kind of have said the last couple of podcasts here, and that's the fact that I'm not so sure David DeCastro was ready to actually retire there, and I'm not so sure that he was ready to become a former member of the Pittsburgh Steelers either. This really seems business related. This seems like I don't know. We'll see what happens long term here, but I mean this almost seems like an opportunity for the Steelers to kind of skirt the initial salary cap charges when it comes to David DeCastro, because obviously, look, if he was injured, and you cannot release injured players, so in lieu of just placing them on IR and having to eat that money that way, they went the way of terminating his contract with the non-football injury tag, and in the meantime, it gets them out of paying the $8.75 million, and obviously the cap charge that goes along with that, they save at least initially here. And as kind of as expected, even though I didn't expect DeCastro to have kind of that detailed of interview afterwards, I mean, not unexpected to kind of hear him say that, look, I'm going to turn this over to the NFLPA and my agent and see if there's a grievance here. And, we'll have to see if how this turns out. Now, David DeCastro, I think in one of those interviews with 93.7 The Fan said, look, he had the initial surgery before last season, right? And then, he wanted to kind of give this thing, give his ankle time this off season and really not do anything, give it several months off this off season and then get back after again and hopefully wouldn't have any issues. Well, he started running and all again and training, and that's when, he started to have the bone spurs, I guess resurfacing that ankle, and we don't know the exact timeline, but in so many words, he said he showed up at mandatory minicamp and had an MRI done on that thing, and that's when it was kind of determined that he would need surgery again. So, we talk about how important the timeline is in this, and the Steelers had to have some inclination that something was going on. I just think when you go all the way back to the end of last season, Alex, once again, the thing that kind of has my mind kind of confused here, and then fast forward, and you didn't do anything during the draft, and you didn't do anything during free agency, and you really didn't bring in any. I mean, yeah, you signed guys like Joe Haig, and I don't know, maybe they consider Joe Haig more of a guard than what we do. But you signed Joe Haig, you signed Rashad Coward. Those weren't big guard free agent names, though, and then you get through the draft, and you didn't draft a guy, and then you get through undrafted free agents and no notable guys, or none included in that list there. It really makes you wonder about the timeline on this thing, and if to me, I don't see how you could not, if you're the Steelers, you had to think that there was a high probability that you were going to have DeCastro this season, and then I guess
right.
You get into OTAs, and once again, the exact time when they probably went, oh no, when was that, and then how the thing kind of played out from there. So I'm still pretty much in shock that David DeCastro is a former member of the Pittsburgh Steelers as we sit here today, and then now it's going to be interesting to see how things move forward with any kind of grievance on David DeCastro's part, and whether or not he indeed resumes his NFL career.
Yeah, I think DeCastro's probably pretty surprised by it as well. I think the timeline of based on what we know, what we're able to cobble together, is kind of what I mentioned on that live stream or Zoom call, I should say, with Dr. Mel last Thursday, where they presumed that DeCastro would be their right guard this year for a large part of this offseason, but later in the spring, probably around OTA time, but DeCastro wasn't reporting, and that was his right; it was voluntary. But he was trying to start to begin training again, and that ankle began to bother him again. And so we told the team, like, I'm having issues. They bring in Trey Turner, and DeCastro comes in the mandatory minicamp, gets the MRI done, and they realize, okay, he's going to need a third surgery. And so that seems to be the timeline of why this thing is so sudden and why this team's kind of scrambling and didn't address the issue earlier in the offseason or release DeCastro earlier in the offseason because they didn't have an intention to do so. But that ankle just simply never got better. And we know he had his first surgery in January of 2020. We're not quite sure where the second came in, and we know a third is about to happen. So that's kind of the timeline of history of his ankle injuries and surgeries.
Right, and once again, if both sides signed off on that physical at the end of the year, we'll have to, at some point, we've been talking about this for a while. We're going to have to make it come to fruition here. Get Joel Corey on and get his take on some of this as well here. Just it's just interesting. At what point does this get classified as a non-football injury? Was this everything looked good back in January, February there, and now your bone spurs have come back. I mean, that's just something that we can't be responsible for. So just the minutia part of it. I mean, obviously the deed is done, the milk has been spilled, and all like that. Personally, I will not, and I've said this, right from the get-go here, is I'm not going to be shocked to see David DeCastro and really the NFLPA or how that goes about file a grievance here, whether or not he wins it. Look, these kind of grievances stay up in the air for a long time, and really the only way that I think that you find out the outcome of these things is if they impact the salary cap and the offseason, and there's an off-season debit. I mean, obviously we saw back in April that the Steelers, I think, received a credit, and really since that time they have had a $120,000 debit, happen. Since there as well, which leads you to believe that might have been an outcome, some sort of grievance on top of it there. So we just sit and wait, and now obviously, look, I mean, David DeCastro hasn't had the surgery yet, at least to our knowledge. We think it's coming, and then another couple months on top of that. Are we talking about David DeCastro that will resume his career later on this offseason or later on this season? I mean, it's possible. And he might just decide, look, that's it as well too. And I think he said that in so many words that whichever way this goes, he's totally comfortable with at this point.
Mm-hmm. Right, because he's got to think about not just 2021, but his long-term future, so his ankle doesn't hopefully not hurt him the rest of his life, and he can walk and be mobile and move around, like normal. So if he gets surgery, let's say a week from now, average recovery, according to Dr. Mello, is about 2 months, probably a little bit longer for DeCastro given the circumstances. That's putting you into the start of the regular season easily. And, no team's going to sign you until you're healthy and cleared and ready to come back. Then you got to be in conditioning and shape, pick up the playbook, try to catch that moving train, as Tomlin says. It's going to be tough to do. So if he wants to come back, I'm sure it's possible, but that probably won't be, realistic until, September, probably. And of course, the season's begun by then.
Exactly.
So we'll see. In terms of the grievance, I think it's interesting. I think DeCastro has a case. I don't really want to debate the merits of it too much because we can just go back and forth forever and we'll just see what happens. But the Steelers, I think, are trying to use this NFI list as they're out here. I don't know if it's going to work. I think DeCastro actually may have a case here.
Yeah, and once again, I'm more curious as to if he doesn't have a case, why? Is one of the interesting things about that. I mean, look, the process is going to be the process here, and it doesn't sound like there's a lot of bad blood here, although off the record, I think DeCastro was quoted as, and not technically off the record because the quote obviously surfaced with his name attached to it, that billionaires are billionaires for a reason. NFL owners are billionaires for a reason there. So in other words, it's a business, and they got around paying me my $8.75 million. Now, that money was not guaranteed, right? I mean, you could obviously, if you got through the rest of the offseason and if this injury wasn't, part of the equation here, and if you just didn't like the way DeCastro was playing, you could just cut him, Mm-hmm. And with that money not being guaranteed, well, that's one way around it. But he was obviously unable to the injury issue is what led to him having to be designated with the non-football injury designation for them to be able to terminate his contract. And once again, I think that's something that obviously you just look at it as they cut David DeCastro, but there's more to that story, and that's what I've kind of said right from the get-go. There's once he didn't go the retirement list route, well then, with him being in the final year of his contract, that made this thing totally different. And then you see the NFI tag on there. That's why I said right out of the chute, there's more to this story than meets the eye. And how long it takes for the rest of that story to completely come out. Obviously, we now know about the bone spurs and him getting the MRI and at minicamp and those kind of things. But going to be interesting to see the rest of this thing play out long term here.
It will, and we'll keep you posted on whatever updates, developments happen. I imagine there probably won't be a lot of news on that front for a little while, but maybe a couple months from now, something's going to come up with at least the status of his surgery and health and the direction of his future and those types of things, Dave. But let's focus on the man now charged to replace David DeCastro, that is Trey Turner, who signed a 1-year, $3 million contract. I don't know if we knew the terms of that deal in terms of the money on Friday's show, but $3 million, so pretty cheap contract overall, although to be honest, it didn't matter to me a whole lot on the money because it's a 1-year deal, A, and B, there isn't a whole lot of other moves this team is likely to make here at some point. It obviously helps that you have a good amount of cap space cleared, and you'd had a salary cap update post over the weekend, Dave, that showed this team's in now, I think, pretty decent shape financially, especially if they do want to restructure the contracts of Tuitt and Boswell, although I suppose you actually don't have to do those guys right now if you really don't want to. So there is more flexibility there. But overall, a pretty reasonably cheap deal for Trey Turner.
Yeah, we don't know. We did not know the financials the other day, but we do now loosely. I will tell you this much. Both the David DeCastro contract termination and the Trey Turner signing have hit the NFLPA sheet this morning, and it resulted in the Steelers gaining exactly $5.75 million in salary cap space. So we already knew that David DeCastro was set to count $8.75 million, and the initial report was that it's a 1-year, $3 million contract on Trey Turner. So $8.75 million minus $3 million gives you $5.75 million. So now the only thing that we don't know is really kind of the exact structure of this Trey Turner. There was a report that there was a $2 million signing bonus. I'm not so sure if it was a $2 million signing bonus or not. It might be more along the lines of 2.7025, whatever, because I think the minimum base salary that Trey Turner can have is $1.075 million based on his vested time in the NFL there. But it does indeed look like his cap charge, however you want to get there, is going to wind up being $3 million, and a good chunk of that probably is indeed a signing bonus, which why wouldn't, I guess the question becomes, why, if it's just a 1-year deal, why not, give him a $3 million base salary? Well, anything in a signing bonus is guaranteed. So he was probably smart to make sure that, hey, if I get cut, at least I pocket this money,
right?
On top of there. So interesting there. I've got a message into Joel Corey here. I hope to find the exact particulars of the layout of this thing. Not that it's going to change the overall cap number on it, but
nothing on incentives or anything.
Not as far. And look, the Steelers don't normally do that kind of thing anyway. But
this offseason's been atypical for a lot of different reasons.
Right,
but very weird.
But with the cap charge coming in at $3 million, then if there are incentives, then they're considered likely to be earned anyway. So,
but anything not likely to be earned that could kick in for next year.
Yeah, I mean it's possible, but the Steelers generally like to stay away from those. Not meaning that that this couldn't be a situation here, but I think it would have came out in the initial report of the $3 million contract. It would have been an up to type situation there, or something along those lines here. So I have a feeling I'll know the particulars of this by the end of the day.
Yeah. Right, because they did it with Rudolph, right? There's some still vaguely unknown incentives in his extension, correct? I believe.
I don't know if there was or not. Was there?
There was some report that there was his base salary of whatever the number was that could be up to X amount of money. I thought it was a little loosely defined and reported, I believe, but I think there was something in there.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at that.
And I know that Morgan Moses of the Jets actually only got $3.6 million, which was a low number, I thought, but he has incentives to go up to $5 million plus. But it probably doesn't mean a whole lot, but just curious on the numbers there on Trey Turner.
He can also earn a total of $3 million in 2021. Rudolph's base salary in 2022 is just $3 million, and his cap charges are now set at $4.04 million in total received. Let's see. The deal Rudolph signed also reportedly includes up to $4 million in additional incentives that are based on play time. So we still don't know the layouts of those.
Right, but we know there's some sort of incentive. But anyway, putting all that aside, Steelers bring up some cap space there. So let me ask you this: I don't want to get into a super deep dive on the cap situation, but do you think A, this team has to restructure to it in Boswell, and B, do you think they still will?
It could go either way, obviously. I mean, because you got an extra $5-point-something million now, and I think they ultimately will. Yes, I do, but it could definitely now. I was more in line of it was most definitely going to happen before this move with DeCastro, but now there's some question as to whether it will. Here's the thing. They are now have the ability. The thing with that leads you to believe that they might do something still with at least maybe a guy like Tuitt is the fact that what's going to happen with the T.J. Watt contract? His cap charge right now in 2021 is a little more than $10 million. Based on the way that I expect this kind of contract to go, it's really hard to imagine based on cash flow expectations of the deal and how you get there with the cash flow. It makes it really, really hard to sign him to an extension and his cap charge, his established cap charge right now, which is a little over $10 million, staying exactly the same. You would think now if they have a little bit more room, they might want to put a little less signing bonus in there and maybe a little bit more base salary. It just helps on the back end. You still get to the same cash flow values. It just kind of alleviates, I guess, kind of the risk in the future, the futureness involved with this. So would you maybe put another $2 million in base salary versus signing bonus there and maybe walk away with his cap charge being maybe $2 million more than what it is now? I think that's legitimately an option here. And look, I mean, you don't know what's coming down the chute the rest of this offseason here. Are they going to get in a position where they want to sign, another outside linebacker or tight end that's more than the minimum? You wouldn't think that any of those players, if they did adjust those positions, would be much more than the minimum. But at least now you are open to the opportunity of that happening.
Or a trade or a cut down or anything like that.
Sure. Now, look, the less likely of the two, I think, at this point would be a guy like Boswell, because you just don't save that terribly much in doing a restructure. And hey, like it or not, as good as he's been, there's a decent chance that this could be his last season.
You think?
I mean, there's a chance.
What makes you say that?
I mean, there's just a chance because he is up all older in age, and kickers, when they go, they fall off the cliff, So
Yeah, but I mean, kickers can kick until they're, how old is he? He's
right,
like
but
30?
I'm saying if there was one position up between him and Tuitt, I mean,
Right.
the likelihood it's less likely that Boswell will be part of the 2022 Steelers than it is Tuitt.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And
I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying, look, remember this conversation because I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, in 2018, he almost got cut then.
Right.
And thankfully, it's bounced back. So no, I agree with you. Yeah, too, it's more likely to be a Steeler than Boswell. I think you just wouldn't do Boswell because, as you said at the top there, it doesn't really save you a lot of money. It was like $1 million if that.
Right.
And you don't really need to squeeze out every single penny the way you probably did a couple months ago.
And it makes them a little bit easier to cut should you have to, somehow, do that. So realistically, I think what you could see happen at this point is maybe Boswell doesn't get restructured and Tuitt still does. I think that's probably at this point the most plausible outcome here between now and now we're talking about 80 days or something. I mean, it's going to go by here pretty quick here. But if I had to guess now, that would be the way that it plays out. No restructure for Boswell, but a restructure for Tuitt to get what you can out of that.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So let's talk about Turner himself on tape, because I know I've spent a lot more time this weekend watching his tape. I know you have as well, Dave. You've probably seen a little bit more on the earlier stuff on Turner than I have, but I still watch some of the 2019 tape because we know he battled the injuries last year, specifically that groin injury that caused him to miss 7 games. But just your thoughts on what the Steelers are getting here with Trai Turner.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time, and boy, you go back through Game Pass, and you start firing up different areas of that you're not used to using this time of the off season.
Like what?
Like the search and the search feature.
Yeah, and that's an underrated feature. I know Game Pass has a lot of issues, but that is a really good feature that I use all the time.
I do too, but the problem is it's missing blocks of stuff in there. Especially when you put in the year and the week and then like certain running backs. Like I don't care to see scrambles, okay? So I and really I don't care to see any wide receiver carries. I wanted to look at just the running back carries alone. So what I did is I set it up by season to show me all the McCaffrey, Samuels, 2019 runs, and I was left with blocks missing in there. So that got me aggravated. And obviously I worked around it, but 270 run snaps of Trai Turner's or 270 run snaps from 2019 that I sorted and watched on the All 22. And this was it ended up being pretty much what my takeaway was the other day when we talked about him. And that's the fact that a very inconsistent player overall in 2019. Look, there are moments in there without a doubt that looked very powerful, mallish, if you will. But just the levels of inconsistency overall and the limits, I think, overall, as far as ability to reach and things of those, that kind of portion of the run game. They didn't run a lot of stuff with him pulling, that stuck out as well too. To me, you're getting a very average, and assuming that he can get to 2019, if that's the version that you're getting there, you're getting a very average offensive lineman.
Yeah, the way I phrased it in a video that went up yesterday on Steelers Depot is mobility will be, I think, the singular question of whether or not Trai Turner succeeds or fails in the Steelers system. And I don't know if he's going to have that mobility or not. He did not have it last year, but we know, again, there was that groin injury. But even though I think pulling will be less of a central theme of Adrian Clem's and Matt Canada's run scheme. You still need to be a really good athlete in what I think is going to be a zone-heavy type of scheme that's going to require a lot of combo blocks and working down the line and reach blocks and cutoff blocks and climbing to the second level. And can Turner do that? And I saw issues on that, of course, in 2020, but also issues in 2019 where he was
linebackers just run right around him.
Yeah. Now, when I think he's able to get fully immediately to the second level and doesn't have the combo at the first level, I think he has the athleticism, and there are moments where you can see him move.
Sure.
The guy's not immobile, but there are times where it just felt sluggish and slow, and he just wasn't getting upfield quickly enough, or just simply wasn't athletic enough to reach targets in space. And I think that's going to be a massive issue if it doesn't get better based on his 2020 and even 2019 tape.
Look, they ran some outside zone, and you know, sometimes depending on if he got the jump on the, he could get out in the outside zone. Really, I think it depends on the guy that he was going against and the specific alignment. If the defensive lineman had him more shaded to the outside in the direction he was going, not so much good success. Now, obviously, you could go around the NFL and say that, you know, for a lot of offensive linemen as well too. Sure. But it really seemed to be kind of 50-50 with him on a lot of it. Now he can look. From a technical standpoint, from a knowing what he's supposed to do, from knowing his role and assignment sound, he looks fine on that aspect.
That was his 2019 tape you were watching?
Right.
I mean, I would hope so, because he had been in Carolina several years
now. But as far as the even execution in 2019, very, very hit and miss. Now look, when he gets his paws on it, he's a mauler. I mean, he really is extremely strong. He is a big body guy too, and I'm not sure I went into the middle of last week remembering what the guy's. It takes a while to get around him, you know. Right. He is a big-bodied guy, and he moved.
He's got that Ramon Foster.
Right. Now, for a guy his size, he moves pretty well for a guy his size. However, I think you have to temper your expectations in what you ask him to do from an athletic standpoint. He's probably about 20% on reach plays on getting that done. That might be a little bit generous there. I mean, just hard for him to reach, guys a gap over at this point of his career, especially on his 2019 tape. Once again, you don't see a lot, even in 2019, you don't see a lot of him pulling, Nope. So, that leads you to believe, are you going to ask him to do a lot of that in Pittsburgh, or are you going to primarily be a right-handed team with Kevin Dotson moving left to right? I think that's what you're going to see a lot of in there. Now, are you going to see outside zone? He can obviously do it. I'd kind of be hesitant to have him maybe be the predominant side on outside zone to that side, because once again, I think it's asking a lot for him to get in a gap and then turn it back, to open up a lane there. But I mean, the physicality's there. He's a very aggressive player. I mean, Clem's going to like him just from the nastiness aspect of it, because he is that kind of I'm bigger and stronger than you are. But as far as an execution standpoint on a play-to-play basis, on 2019 tape, it's exactly what I think I said the other day. Very, very inconsistent. I don't see how he made a Pro Bowl, at least based on his run tape. I'm still going through his pass protection tape from 2019. I don't see how he made the Pro Bowl that year. He just looks like a very average offensive lineman in 2019, and I think the Steelers would be lucky to get that version of him.
Yeah, and then in pass pro, the thing I saw with him was that he got beat to the inside a ton when D tackles crossed his face and they would shade in the line outside and then counter inside. He lost repeatedly. So if I'm the Steelers in pass, but I'm going to have to probably slide the center to his side a lot there to protect that side. So he can focus on just kind of sitting, to the outside a bit and sealing his guy upfield, not having to be so worried about getting beat to the inside. I saw that in 2020 and in 2019. So that's a concern there. So, yeah, overall, is he going to be a great scheme fit? Obviously, the Steelers think so. Otherwise, they wouldn't have signed him. But I just wonder, in a scheme that's going to demand a lot of athleticism from their offensive linemen across the board, is he going to have enough to do it on a consistent basis? I think is a big question.
I mean, he's the least athletic guy on that line right now, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Banner moves were better than him, I think.
Yeah, well,
or at least
ACL 59. I barely know anything about Zach Banner as a true offensive tackle. So I mean, I think but point taken for sure. I mean, he is not the most athletic lineman. Trey Turner is not on the Steelers offensive line.
Now, all this said, people say, "Oh boy, the haters have arrived, or the haters are back with Dave and Alex banging on this." Look, we said this the other day. They had no choice but to sign Trey Turner. I mean, in my opinion, unless you sit around, I mean, who else is out there right now, and could you afford to wait to see if there's a potential upgrade over him? My view is you got yourself in this situation this late. I mean, I feel you almost had to go after a guy like Trey Turner. So now you get what you get. At this point, and that get what you get, I believe, and once again, I think they will be good to get the 2019 version of. I think you hope and pray you got at least the 2019 version of Trey Turner, and then you try to work with it from there. Now, Father Time's undefeated. A lot has happened since that 2019 season, obviously. So, but once again, I don't fault them for the signing. I think it's a signing you had to make this time of the season, and thankfully it $3 million or less. But I also see evidence on tape of why Trey Turner was unsigned this late in the offseason, and why probably most teams that were probably willing to sign him were willing to sign him for less than $3 million.
Right, and just all the baggage he had, whether that was the injuries and Carolina shipping him out to the Chargers, and the Chargers cutting bait with him after a season. And then the fact he was still a free agent here in late June. But again, there are positives, and there are the things I mentioned, I think, on Friday's show with his overall play strength, his punch, the violence in his hands. I think he wins whenever a pass rushers try to beat him to the outside in the passing game. So I think he does a good job there. But just overall consistency and just forward body lean and getting beat to the inside a lot, some of that lateral mobility and being able to mirror rushers, I think are just inconsistent problem areas for him.
Look, he's a helper. He's a look for work guy, generally, I think. Not so much, I don't think, in his 2020 tape, but there's a lot of it, I think, in 2019. There's a handful of pancakes in there in his 2019 tape. There are situations where he does win win the race to the second level and can get his mitts on some of those inside linebackers. But just you really have to go into it with an open mind, looking at his tape and knowing, okay, well, I found this here, but can he consistently do it? And the answer is no. It's just, once again, it goes back to, very inconsistent play with him. And I hope at worst they have the 2019 version of him. Mm-hmm. I mean, you go back further in his tape, 2017. I mean, this guy was obviously several years younger, and you can see why he was one of the more dominant guards in the NFL there. But 2017 was a long time ago, man. And 2018 tape's okay. 2019 is when, in my opinion, really average. And then obviously last year, and we don't know. We talked about this right out of the chute with him when he came in, when he was listed as a visitor there. How much did the whole COVID process and then the groin and the rehab process, he looked a shell of himself, really, for a better part of 2020. That's why I really want to spend a lot of time going back and looking at his 2019 tape. And once again, I've made it all the way through his run tape. I've made it through, I don't know, about 100 pass protection snaps, I guess.
Yeah, so we'll keep talking about it. We'll keep watching for it. But to your point, let's say that you get 2019 version of Trey Turner, which you called an average guard. Is that good enough for the Steelers offense? And I guess that would mean the other guys around him better be playing a lot better than average to kind of compensate for that.
Right. I mean, look, I've seen some it all goes to run success rates, mostly, and then obviously in protection and all. I don't think he's a guy. I think you can hide it to some degree, How much harder is it going to be on Najee Harris? Can he overcome it? Look, we've seen, you go back a couple Super Bowls ago, we've seen some offensive lines that weren't great, that ended up having, that obviously ended up competing for championships, right?
Yeah, the 08 line was not very good, but you're going to get that 08 kind of defense again. I mean, you still have a really good defense, but do you have that level of it and that level of Ben play?
We've said, I think we agree on this and have for a while. This if the Steelers 2021 team's going anywhere, it's going to be because that defense is just unreal,
Right.
If you look back over, the last two Super Bowl championship teams that the Steelers have had, winning teams, that defense has just been lights out.
But we don't think this defense is going to be as good as it was in 2019, 2020, or where was that in 2008?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't either.
Now, look, is losing DeCastro, replacing DeCastro with Trey Turner going to be the reason that we point? Well, the Steelers offense couldn't get it done, and it was because of this one move. No,
yeah, it's the whole reinvention of this offense line. And granted, it probably needed to be reinvented, but make no mistake, there are going to be big growing pains along the way trying to figure this thing out, trying to rebuild this thing.
I think it goes back to what we've really said all offseason here is, can the offense take enough step forward to overcome whatever degree of step backwards that this defense makes? Look, if this defense doesn't register a 5.7 or less adjusted net yards per passing attempt number, it don't matter anyway. None of this matters, However, if they can get to that point or better, I really think, I'll be stunned if we're talking about a Steelers defense that's flirting with a, 5.2 or less number, adjusted net yards per passing attempt number throughout the season. I would be shocked, but we'll definitely see. But assuming they don't, then you definitely need that offense to help overcome that. And I'm not convinced. I'm not to a position where I think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm not either. As we sit here today, obviously things can and will change, and we'll get eyes on these guys here starting, pretty soon. But big question marks.
Right.
All right, David, anything else on Trey Turner you want to mention, or you kind of want to table that, and we'll go back to him probably for a future episode when we kind of watch a little bit more of his game.
Yeah, let's or at least I need to watch more of his pass protections, snaps. But without a doubt, this team's going to want to try to, you think, run better, and that's where it starts there, and you don't want to get in many situations where you're obviously having Ben Roethlisberger hold the football too terribly long. But right. Once again, the snaps that I've seen from 2019 in pass protection, are a lot of what you just lined up. Getting beat to the inside there, lack of athleticism, more mauler than anything else. When it comes to that, and I doubt that's going to change the rest of his 2019 tape when I go through it.
Dave, I'm guessing another area on Game Pass where the search bar has gotten pretty worn out is with Deontay Johnson. You spent the last about the last week or so kind of breaking down all 13 of his drops from the 2020 season. 15 is a 15.
Or
okay,
18.
I always forget. Yeah, it depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
But the Baker's dozen or so, 15, whatever it is, number of drops and just kind of, I know I had written about it and talked about some of the focus issues, and I charted at least 4 drops about a month ago about him just simply not looking the ball in. They weren't because he had bad hands or anything like that, just took his eyes off the football before securing the catch. And what are your overall takeaways now that you've gone back through and shown the tape on all of his drops?
Yeah, let's just start with the obvious here, and drops is a very subjective thing. There are those that are, but I mean, you wonder, people say, well, why isn't this an official stat? Why are errors in baseball an official stat? You want to talk about something very subjective, errors in baseball, right? Official score in that aspect there. I think it should be, even though it can be subjective. I went back through, I did this before, I just didn't really catalog them to the degree and show the examples, the actual visual examples since last season and all. And just to show you the difference in opinion, from Sports Info Solutions to Pro Football Focus, there's a difference of about 3 or 4 of them in there, So what I wanted to do is go through the list that both of them had collectively and look at each one and then see if there's really kind of anything that jumped out after, see if it was how subjective and how much blame should be on the drop, and then kind of go from there. There were a few of them, and look, I don't know how you feel about blaming a wide receiver for a drop after he has slipped down at the top of his route. I mean, to me, that's one problem begotten another problem, right? I mean, the guy slips at the top of his route, tries to get back up, and the ball's on target, and he clanks off one of his hands as he's trying to get up. It's kind of hard to label that a drop. Now, I will label it as got to do a better job of not slipping out of your routes, at the top of the routes. But that's something that I had identified with Deontay Johnson as a problem, when he was drafted. Going back to his Toledo time. So there's about 3 of those in there. I think there's a couple where, look, the game against Dallas, right? That little wide receiver screen over there to the other side. I think Sports Info Solutions called that a drop, and Ben put that ball on the wrong side of him, Now, are there drops that are on Deontay Johnson in his 2020 tape? Obviously, yes. And there's a lot of them. Most of those come via either quick slants, drags, or digs. Mostly with him working toward the center of the field. All right. Okay. And as you stated, it's very hard to slow this stuff down and state he definitely took it. He definitely didn't keep his eye on the ball and watch it all the way. And I think there's a couple of them where you can definitely say that. Here's what I think we now know and probably knew before all this. Deontay Johnson's not a great bad ball catcher. Would you agree on that?
Wait, repeat that? He's not a good bad ball catcher?
He's not a good bad ball catcher.
I don't know. I think he makes some really tough catches. I always praise him.
Well, there's the one against Seattle. Well, who was it a couple years ago? Him down on his knees. Was it the Seattle game, week 2, I think?
So. Yeah, and then there was, I think, the Titans game last year. I said he makes the tough catches look easy and the easy catches look tough. I think he's. I don't know how to characterize him exactly, but I think he's a decent bad ball catcher.
I would go below average. I don't think he is. Now, not saying that he hasn't had bad ball catches, because he has. We just named a couple of them there. But I think collectively, he's not. I believe collectively he does not have a huge catch radius, and I believe him to be an under average bad ball catcher.
Okay.
Is where I come out on him. Now, I don't think he's huge on working short toward the middle of the field where people are. I think a little bit of that's in the back of his head there. Because you do see, now look, overall, and I think Next Gen Stats has a stat on this from late last season. Where do most drops in the NFL happen?
I imagine middle of the field.
And short, within 10 yards.
Short. Yeah. I think the fear of getting hit is probably part of that with Johnson, but I think maybe the bigger portion to me, and who knows, it's all subjective, but is he's so focused on getting upfield and making the post-catch move and getting the yak because he's running all these short routes and they're trying to get yak. That was the philosophy of the offense last year. So I think it's one part, I don't want to get hit, but another part of I need to get upfield immediately to start making my next move and doing something after the catch.
Right. I would agree. No argument for me on that as well, too. I think by going back and watching everything last season and all, I took it away that this thing, if you look at the first several weeks, okay, he's got a handful of drops. How many are actually on him? Those kind of things, especially I think when you get to the game. Hold on a minute. Let me pull up the list here. All right, the first one against the Giants, that quick slant, you got to catch that. That's just him not looking at it all the way in and trying to run with a football. Maybe the same thing on that drag route against the Broncos. The Titans, the drop that he's charged with in the Titans on that curl route at the top. Once again, I think that might have been an issue of him breaking one way, Ben putting the ball the other. I'm not so in short. I'm not so sure that one's on him. The same, I think, with that curl route against the Cowboys that PFF has him down for. Now the drag over the middle, I think, on the game against the Bengals. Was that the one with that resulted in the interception? No. That was one. No, I'm thinking of a different one there. But I think he should have had that one. Long story short, from week 1 to week 10, I can live with what had happened during that span. I think the Steelers could too, because once again, I think maybe you're looking at 2 to 3 realistic drops during that span. Now, when you get into that week 12 game against that three game stretch that he had was brutal, starting with the Ravens and then Washington and then obviously the Bills. I think it started to get in his head there.
Sure.
And I think he has obviously said as much as well, too. You're reading that kind of stuff. The drop totals are climbing on the official score list. You had 3 in a game against Washington, and it's easy to kind of look at that, too, because what ended up being the end result in the game against Washington?
A loss? Is that what you're asking?
Right, their first loss of the season.
Right.
And how many drops were in that game? 6 or 7?
It's ridiculous.
Then
I'm sure Tomlin's statement of if you keep dropping passes, you're going to get benched. And then what happens? The Bills game happens. He drops passes, and I'm sure he heard that. And Tomlin has his press conferences delivering messages to players, not just to media and fans. And he drops 2 passes early and gets benched because of it. So, yeah, I'm sure a lot of it was in his head last year.
Once again, you get to week 12, you have a couple listed there. Okay, all right, bad game. Get into Washington and just not only him, but the team in general, just all the drops in that game. And, oh, yeah, they lost that game. It's easier to go in and start magnifying that stuff, especially on a loss, right? Sure. And that became that big talk. Boy, Ebron and Deante they can't hold on to the football. He's probably reading that stuff. And anyway, I really think it got into his head. And then the first play of the damn Bills game, you try to run the wide receiver screen, and I understand why you do it. You want to get this guy involved early in the game. You want to give him an easy catch, right? And then what does he do? He doesn't look that all easy. He's so focused about getting upfield on that wide receiver screen and making a play happen. He drops very easy, and then he's thinking at the start of that game, oh, man, I can't drop another one. Well, next one over the middle on a drag route, he drops 10:44 in the first quarter, and then, oh, hell, Thomas says, hey, you're out of here, for a quarter or so there. Then you get into, unfortunately, in that game against the Colts, right out of the chute, I think he's thinking about it, and you have 2 drops within the first 15 seconds of the game. One via quick slant, one via the drag route there, and I just think this thing snowballed on him. Now, look, I wanted to make sure I went back and looked at his drops. He had 3 in his rookie season, 2019. Prior to that, at Toledo, his final 2 years, I think he had 3 and 6. Once again, this is not a guy that's going to have the most perfect hands. And once again, these seem to be working toward the middle of the field here. I guess my main takeaway here when it comes to Deontay Johnson and these drops are he deserves the benefit of the doubt. I hope that him working with the tennis ball machine and working on the focus aspect of it and all like that, I really think that you're going to see these drop numbers go back down to, I don't know, anywhere between 3 to 6. Now, people listening probably say, well, 1 drop's way too many. Yeah, I would agree on that, but they're going to happen. I think it's a lot to expect with the amount of targets that Deante gets, that you're not going to get through the season without any drops. I think 3 to 6 is sustainable, if you will, when it comes to him. I think he deserves a benefit of the doubt here because of the amount of targets, because of the area of the field that he's working. Now, if you get in over that, if we get to the start of the season, he's got a couple out of shoot, and then, here we are week 4 and he's got 7 drops, then yeah, maybe it's going to concern here. But I just look at the totality and how these things happen overall. I'm not overly worried. I think you'll see about 3 to 6 drops, and obviously people are going to be talking about every one of them. I'm just not overly worried about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the good still outweighs the bad. The pros of his game are still outweighing the cons, and that's still the important thing right now. And again, if he just focuses on the football and looks at it and just does a better job of that and being consistent with that, then he'll still have the occasional drop or two because his hands aren't great. As you said, his hand size isn't huge, and the catch radius isn't enormous overall compared to some 6'4" type of receiver, but it's not going to be a big issue for him or for this offense. So just look the football in, secure it. I know it's a little easier said than done because the focus so much is, especially as that X receiver, about getting all that yak. But if he does that, the drop numbers will normalize, be around 5-6%, and you can live with that.
Right. And especially for the amount of targets that he has. And look, I mean, once again, a few of these that are scored against him, I think are tough calls. Now, granted, a lot of them from last season were flat out drops there. But if you keep that, and obviously just putting totals on it, you can't do that because it's more of a percentage and all. But I think he'll return to a more manageable. Now, I tell you one thing that's evident too when you watch some of these too. He's got a lot of separation, man, and. Is that a trade-off with him that, an extra clank or two off the hands for a guy that can get that much separation within the first 5 yards off the line of scrimmage? I mean, this guy is a premier separator off the line. And, you'd like to see less drops, but there are not too many receivers across the league that can as consistently get 3 to 5 yards of separation in some instances here.
Yeah, he's a really strong, nuanced route runner for how young he is. I posted a clip last night because I saw him. He was working out on some of his routes and some training in the offseason. But the route he ran against Dallas last year would have been a touchdown if Ben had the time or saw him. But it was my favorite route he ran the entire season. Just got in that corner's blind spot and cut it back to the post middle of the field and was dusting that corner. And so he's a really strong route runner.
I think a lot of it is he don't like getting hit. One of those slot fades against Baltimore was one of his first of 2 drops, I think, in that game. He kind of alligator arms it. That safety's coming over, working over the side, and really, there was no reason for him to kind of alligator arm it, but he did.
Well, if that's the issue, then that's going to be a big problem. Because if it's a focus issue, I think that's more fixable than a I don't want to get hit issue.
Well, go back and look at some of his drops in early in the or 2009, his rookie season there. There's an alligator arm or two in there. I don't think he loves working across the middle, being prepared to take a hit. I think that to some degree plays a part in this.
Yeah. Well, then that should, if that's the case, that should worry you. It would worry me, because that's prime real estate is at a backside X receiver. Like, you have to thrive making plays the whole route tree, but especially middle of the field.
I think that's an aspect of it being in his head too.
Okay.
I mean, go look at some of these. Some of these it looks. I mean, look at the one against the Colts with that linebacker there in the middle field, and him kind of taking a peek up and looking at that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of these are. A few of these are. I should say, a few of these are. Man, maybe trying to, not focusing on the ball because I'm looking around seeing if I'm about to get hit.
Right. Yeah, no, maybe, but if that's the case, that to me would be pretty worrying. If that really is the biggest reason.
All right, we'll see.
My advice to Deontay Johnson would be just to not be on social media at all. Just take a hiatus once the season begins, because he starts reading that crap, starts getting into his head some more. Just turn it off, unplug. It's not going to be worth it.
The good thing about AB is AB learn how to kind of get down and avoid a lot of those hits,
Oh, yeah, he was the best at that. He could contort his body like none other, especially as a punt returner, too, which is really important because you don't want him getting hurt back there. But, yeah, he never took a big hit, almost never.
And whereas Deante, I think, sometimes worried about trying to turn every 4-yard catch into a 30-yard run there. Maybe when working over the middle there, maybe a little bit maybe do a better job of making sure you don't get the big pop first,
Yeah, I wonder if AB played baseball growing up, knowing how to slide and stuff. Maybe Deontay should run the bases a little bit, just knowing how to kind of contort your body. But I hope it's more of an issue of just him trying to make the big play, and it's not an issue of him worried about getting popped.
All right, well, we shall see.
Dave, you're doing a nice series for the offseason right now. You're 90-30, just doing a camp preview on all the Steelers' 90-man roster in alphabetical order. You don't have to go through every single player here, but you've done, about 6 of these so far, maybe even more. Any players that you kind of thought about differently or learned more about, or just had a different frame of mind after you wrote kind of their 90-30 roster preview?
Rephrase that again?
Any players of note or interest in your 90-30 you just finished up with Carlos Davis, Stephen Denmark, and Joshua Dobbs? Any players that you kind of thought about differently or just had a different perspective on after you kind of thought about what their camp preview is going to be?
No, I don't think overall. I mean, a lot of these guys obviously are going to be, guys that aren't going to have at least what you would view as much of a chance to they're going to be fringe players regardless, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think if there's anybody that jumps out of mind that I would say, oh man, I think I learned something here on this guy, and I just can't.
About Ivante Collinson, you were asking about, are they going to view him as a tackle or a guard, and what do you think is best for him? And not that we know a lot about him, granted, but do you think it's going to change his chances or outlook at all if he's playing tackle or playing guard, given all the question marks that are still on his offensive line, not only with starters but also with the depth of the Steelers' offensive line?
The thing with him. Well, I mean, obviously, look, the Steelers view a lot of these guys to be position flexible, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're a backup, you got to be able to play multiple spots.
And we've obviously known that for quite a while. And I find it hard, some of these guys, though, viewing them as tackle, like Coyle, for example, right? I mean, it seems like there's a few pictures online where he might have gotten some guard look.
Is there?
During the off-season program. It's hard to tell. They're getting better and better at kind of covering those things up nowadays, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are some instances, I think, where you kind of wonder, I mean, do they really view this guy as being guard capable,
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, just the more hats you can wear, the better. So I think he's a tackle by nature, I believe. But if he can play a little inside in a pinch, then the more you can do, the better odds of sticking around.
Right. Just little instances like that, I think.
Okay. Cool.
Today, is there anybody that has stuck out to you that you think that I've maybe outlooked wrong?
No, I was just curious to get your thoughts on the series.
Okay. Today we have actually players that are going to stick. We have Ebron, Edmonds, and who was the other one?
I do not know.
I'm trying to pull it up here real quick here.
I remember my Steelers alphabet.
Yeah.
Too well.
Ebron, Edmonds, and
Fryermuth. I don't know.
No, it goes. I don't have it sorted correctly here.
Okay.
Now.
Well, read and find out. That'll be the teaser. Who is the third mystery man in the list?
No, I got it here. Hold on a minute. Dotson. Kevin Dotson. That guy that's out of shape.
Looks terrible. Looks a mess.
What about that? I mean, what a crazy report that is. It just unreal. I mean, if there's one guy that I'm not overly worried about on that Steelers offensive line right now, it's Kevin Dotson. I mean, obviously you're worried about him being a young player still, but there's other worries for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right, Dave, anything else you want to talk about Steelers related? Again, not a ton of new news here. How about Chris Boswell? I didn't realize this. Of kickers with a minimum of 45 attempts the last 2 years, Boswell has the best field goal percentage in the league, even a point better than Justin Tucker. So Boswell, I don't think we recognize how well that guy's bounced back from that disastrous 2018 season enough, because he got real close to being cut and is rounded back into form.
Yeah, look, that's one thing that I did actually write up in his write up a few days ago in the series. There was the fact that career high field goal percentage there. Now he did miss a couple of the extra points, right? Last season there, and obviously you'd like didn't have that high of a total of a actual. You just wish he would have had more chances. Now, he did miss a few games there on top of it due to groin and hip injuries, I think was the official word on that kind of stuff there. And that's kind of scary overall. But, look, he bounced back, and that was one of the things I was worried about too was, is this going to be a guy going to be able to bounce back?
Right, and he did in an absolutely huge way. So hopefully that continues, and we'll see with if there's a new holder. We'll see how that dynamic works. I mean, hopefully it won't be an issue. But if it's a rookie and Harper the third, I think Barry's been a good holder, so that's always important. That continuity between snapper, holder, and kicker.
Right, for sure.
All right, Dave. Anything else, or do you want to get to some reader emails and close out today's show?
Seems like we're missing something somewhere here, right? No?
Are we? I don't think so. Anything super major important?
Okay, let's see here. And once again, we do hope to have. Also, we're supposed to have John Eisenberg from Ravens.com on the show. Got some confirmation of that happening a few days ago as well, too. So we look forward to that as we start rolling through some of these off-season topics and looking at other teams around the AFC North there moving forward. So excited about that happening as well. Now, as far as the email machine goes, I don't know if we got many of those. Let's see here. Daily roundup. Best wishes to David DeCastro. You've served the Steelers well. Got that one in the email box. Trying to see if we got anything else worthy to talk about here. Let's see. Tinfoil hat time from Simon Short. David Alex. What is the likelihood that David, one, realized he needed ankle surgery and would need the year to recover? The team decided to cut him to save the money for this year and let him recover. He circles back next year on a new 1 to 2 year deal. He goes on to say, feels like he doesn't want to close the door on coming back, which is why he didn't retire. But I don't see why he wouldn't come back next year after recovering if he still wants to play.
I mean, maybe. Well, don't know what the future's going to hold for DeCastro. One step at a time. At a time. See how the surgery goes, and if he signs anywhere, I'm sure he probably still. If he gets a surgery now, it's probably with the hope of hopefully playing at some point this season. But I think the odds of him coming back to Pittsburgh, to your question, is not. I guess not zero, but pretty low.
I would be surprised. I don't foresee this as some grand plan, if you will. Well, let's do this because of this, and then this. No, I don't think that was the case at all when it comes to that. So I would never say never, but I'll be shocked if David DeCastro circles back around to the Steelers. Look, I mean, he might be done. Period.
Yeah. Absolutely.
He very well. He's made plenty of money. I think he kind of got that back, or got that part of it out in general. That look, whatever happens, moving forward here, and that he's fine whichever way this goes. And it sounds like he's had some problems with that ankle for a while. He thinks that he's really thinking about his life past football. Keeping some level of mobility. He's got 2 or 3 kids now, and I could really foresee this being it for him.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
overall,
you don't want to be that guy that's in pain for the rest of your life because you played one more year in the NFL. I mean, it's already going to probably be in pain just because he's been a lineman for a decade now. But yeah, you don't want to be that guy that just has that horrible pain for the next 40 years.
Right. And let's see. Zach Mandel writes in, "Hello, fellas. Football history question for you, spurred by Alex's post of Lynn Swann's last TD catch. When Bradshaw is dropping back from under center in that video, he backpedals straight back. When did quarterback technique start to transition to the turned hip side stepping, technical terms for sure, we see today, and that I know quarterbacks have used as long as I've been watching football? Was there a particular trailblazer in the shift in technique, and was the backpedal the normal way quarterbacks dropped back in Bradshaw's day in the 70s, or was it mixed?"
That's a really good question. I'm going to try to look up the answer here as we talk about it, because I don't know the answer off the top of my head. It is funny how they changed from that back pedal to the traditional or the now normal NFL drop back. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, I seem to remember. I seem to remember.
Maybe Bill Walsh might have had some sort of influence here.
Well, I mean, even looking back to Staubach, I'm not convinced Staubach. I seem like Staubach did more of a traditional, or what we know as a traditional drop back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure there were people before. I mean, it wasn't like an all-at-once kind of thing. But someone saying Unitas used more of the standard drop back today. But I don't know exactly. But I've seen some stuff on Bill Walsh on the West Coast because the timing of it was so important that if you had that traditional drop back, the timing got screwed up and the quarterback wasn't in rhythm on some of those, really quick slants and things like that. So it might have been more of an 80s thing, but I don't know if there was one moment in time where you could really say like that changed.
Right. Well, maybe that's worth researching at some point.
Yeah, it's a good question.
All right, I think we've got the bulk of them out of there then. So we will be back again on Friday, once again with our buddy John Eisenberg, and we'll talk a little bit of Ravens there, what's all transpired with them throughout the offseason. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, please go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button. For $25 for one calendar year, you can have an ad-free version of the site. Appreciate all the people that are taking advantage of that as well, too. And once again, appreciate having Dr. Mel on the podcast recently and her write-up on the site. If you haven't read that on David DeCastro and the Bone Spurs, it's well worth your time when it comes to that as well. And let's see, make sure you follow her on Twitter at Girl Surgeon. We would appreciate that. So in the meantime, until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.